Hi everyone, as promised, this is going to be a quick tutorial video on the new Sizzix Crepe Paper Flower collection. I'm going to run through each flower individually, show you how I assembled it, how I curled the petals, how many of each petal I've cut, etc. This will be a useful guide for you if you've bought these lovely flower dies and the crepe paper. Use this as a guide. This isn't an absolute, this is how you make them, because the beauty of these flowers is that it's up to you how many of each petal you cut, so, and how you shape it so that your individual flower looks how you want it to do. But I know it will be useful to you to have a starting point. So what I'm going to do is show you exactly how I put together each of these flowers. I'm going to run through all of them. So we've got the Fringed Tulip, we've got the classic Rose, my favourite, the Ranunculus. Then we've got the wild Peony, that's this one here. We've got the Carnation and we've got the California Poppy. So I'll run through all of them. I'll also explain to you, if you didn't see the shows, I'll tell you all about the crepe paper and the gorgeous colours, and I'll show you the full packs of those. And what I'll do is I'll do each flower individually, and I'll put a photo before each tutorial of the finished flower, so you can kind of see the finished one before you start. It'll also help you if you only want to see, perhaps, you know, if you've only bought a couple of the dies and you want to skip to that one, you can skip forward. Hopefully the photo, having the photo first, will enable you to find the one you want quickly. So I'll switch my camera around and we'll run through each flower individually. So let's start by looking at the crepe paper before we get into the individual tutorials. These are the sets. So you've got Serenity. This set's got some lovely lilacs and purples in it. It's got a couple of pinks. All of the sets have got a couple of greens and a couple of yellows, so that you've got a good starting point for your flowers, because obviously you're going to need green for your leaves and yellow probably for your flower centres, etc. So that set is Serenity. This set is Colour Splash. This set's got some lovely bright sort of sunflower orangey yellows. It's got some gorgeous bright sort of coral and a pink. It's got a lovely burgundy sort of colour as well, so that's quite a nice bright set. And then the third set is Vintage. This one's got more sort of muted tones. I particularly like this really pale pink for the ranunculus, but you've got a couple of dramatic sort of really dark burgundies there which look lovely for the tulips. You've got a nice peach there as well. And again, you've got some greens and yellows for the flower centres. So between all three sets, you've got some really stunning colours. Now, each set has got 10 rolls. And each roll is 12 by 24 inches. So there's a lot of crepe paper there. In terms of quality, I've got a sheet here. This is really good quality. Crepe paper does vary in quality, and you can get quite thin crepe paper which tears easily. This is the ideal weight really, because if it's too heavy it's sort of harder to shape. This is towards the heavy weight, but it's not really heavy, so it's got a good stretch to it. The stretch on this will stretch 150%, so that's a really good stretch in it for shaping petals. You'll see that when we come to the tutorials, that it is really fabulous in terms of the sort of shape holding you get from it. So that's the crepe paper. You'll really see the quality of the crepe paper as we use it, and you'll definitely understand what I mean when I talk about the stretch and how it sort of holds the shape, because that's really important when you're making these kind of flowers. So let's get straight onto it and we'll do the flowers. I'm going to start with the Fringed Tulip. I would say in terms of ease of putting together, the tulip and the poppy are probably the most straightforward, because there's not much petal shaping involved with those. So what I'm attempting to do is I'll do these tutorials starting with what I think are the easiest, and we'll build up. I think the Ranunculus is probably the hardest out of them. None of them are very hard at all, but the ranunculus, you do need to shape the petals quite well to get, if you want a closed sort of ranunculus. Also, that one does need the most petals, so I would say that's the most difficult of them all. So we're going to start with the Fringed Tulip. So the fringed tulip is a relatively straightforward one because all you're going to need to cut is one of each of the 3 petals. You need 3 of this centerpiece, and then this is a leaf for the stem, so 1 or 2 of these. So what I'm going to do is start off with the 3 centerpieces. So I'm going to die cut those. I'm going to use some yellow for those. Now I need to mention about the crepe paper actually, because obviously I've mentioned about the stretchability, and you do need to bear in mind the way that the stretch is going to go. Obviously the grain of this goes downwards. When you're cutting any of the petals, you want to make sure that the grains are running vertically down your petal, because that's going to enable you to stretch them across. If you were die cutting them that way, the stretch would be going upwards, and all you'd be doing was making your petal really long, which obviously doesn't help you with shaping a petal. So even for the centerpieces, that same rule is going to apply. So I'm going to be die cutting all of these with the grain running down. So I'm going to die cut this 3 times. So I've got 3 of those, and now I'm going to die cut 1 each of these large petals. I'm going to use this nice dark burgundy, and again I'm going to die cut them so that the grain of the crepe paper is vertical on the petal. So I'll run those through. Okay, so I've got 1 each of the petals and 3 of those centerpieces. I'll just put that die set to one side. So to start off your flower, before we get to assembling the crepe paper, there are a couple of extra things you need. You need some sort of bead. I've got some inexpensive wooden beads. It doesn't matter what bead, what colour, because you're going to cover the bead with crepe paper if it's going to be on show. But you do need a bead that's got quite a wide hole, because you're going to be putting florist wire through it. Now I've got some quite inexpensive florist wire here for my stems. I got mine in Hobbycraft. I think you can pick these up anywhere. I actually had a load in my drawer from, I don't know when I bought them, but I picked up a few more, but I think they're only about £1 a pack. So what you're going to do is just put a bit of a bend in the top of your wire so that it fits a bit more snugly in the wooden bead, and pop some hot glue into the bead so that that's going to hold your wire. Now I would recommend using finger protectors, because obviously it's hot glue. I have got asbestos fingers, especially after making so many of these flowers, but it does help to have a finger protector, because putting your fingers straight in hot glue is not much fun. So once I've got that in there, the beauty of the hot glue is that that pretty much is set instantly, so I can move straight on to the next step. I would say for these flowers, a hot glue gun is an essential item. You would take forever to use any other sort of glue, because you'd have to kind of wait for it to set in between putting each petal on, and you'd be there all day. So you do, I think you do really need a hot glue gun. So for the tulip, the first thing we're going to do is these 3 centerpieces we're going to cover that bead with. And what you want to do is, and this is where the beauty of the crepe paper comes in, because I mentioned about the stretch. If you place your 2 thumbs in the bottom section of that and just give it a little stretch, you're going to form a lovely little cup shape, and that's going to cover the bead nicely. Pop some glue just along the bottom and slightly up the side, and then we can just lay that on top of the bead and stick it down like so. And we're going to do the same for all 3 pieces. So just give it a stretch to create that nice cup shape. Glue around the bottom and the sides, and then we'll overlap this slightly. Obviously it depends what size bead you've used, as you might want more, but I've cut 3 of these for this size bead, and it's perfect. So just a bit of glue like so. So that's covered the bead nicely. It won't be on show anyway, actually. You will only see a tiny piece of this. And then once you've got all 3 on, you can just twist the top like so. and that's going to give you kind of the inside of your tulip. So the next step is kind of the same really. So for each of these petals, you can see they're flat at the bottom, and if you just do the same thing with your two thumbs and give it a stretch, you're going to create a little cup shape at the bottom. And you're going to do exactly the same. Cover the bead with that cup shape, like so. There we go. Same thing, glue around the bottom. And again, just overlap them slightly. Like so. Shape it around the bead because you do want that kind of rounded shape at the bottom. And then the last one, do exactly the same. Like so. There we go. And then the fringed tulip's got quite a sort of loose organic look. So in terms of stretching the crepe, just do it here and there, just to fill those petals out a little bit. Fan them out. Like so. And then that is your finished tulip. Now there is a leaf in the set as well. So we'll quickly die cut that from some green card. So I've got my leaf, and then for the leaf, really you can either have it sort of right at the base of the flower or on the wire, whatever you fancy really. If you're putting it on the wire, just wrap it around. Again, use a finger protector because you will get hot glue kind of seeping out. Tidy that up. Then it's personal preference really as to whether you want to add florist wire to the stem. I think if you're adding a leaf, it does kind of neaten it up a bit because you will see the glue a little bit. And with this, you need to just stretch it a little bit to sort of activate the adhesive in it. And then all you need to do is wrap it around. Now, when you watch YouTube tutorials of people that are fabulous at making these sort of flowers, they're so fast at putting this on. And I'm so slow because I'm not used to doing this. But it's down to personal preference. It kind of depends for me what I'm going to do with the flower. If it's going in a vase where you won't really see the stem, and particularly if it's going to be stuck in Oasis or something, then I probably wouldn't bother putting this on. But if the stem is going to be on show, and if you find that where you've put your leaf on it looks a bit messy, then add some tape. It's very inexpensive, this tape, and you can get this in craft shops. I've also seen it in garden centres and things as well. So again, it's relatively inexpensive and easy to add. So if you want to add that, you can do. And there we go. So we've got a couple. You will find you've got bits of glue string everywhere that you'll have to pick off. And there we go. There's a couple of tulips. So next up we've got the California poppy, which is this lovely sort of floppy organic looking flower. Really quite it's got a real wildflower feel to it, I think. So the California poppy is quite an easy one to assemble because, like the tulip, you just need one each of all the petals and one each of these to go round the flower centre. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare the flower centre, and I think we'll use the larger size bead for this. Now, because this is very much going to be on show with this flower, I'm going to cover the beads with crepe paper. So what I'm going to do first of all is pop it on a piece of wire as before. So I've got my florist wire here. Just going to bend the top over a little bit. Pop some hot glue into the bead. like so. Then pop my wire in, and I'll leave that for a second just for the glue to cool down and for it to set. Then the next thing I'm going to do is take some of the light yellow crepe paper, and I'm just going to cover this bead. So what I'm going to do is cut a very rough oval shape. Really doesn't have to be very neat at all. That will do. And then I'm going to go with the stretch of the crepe just to turn that into a bit of a cup shape so that it will fit nicely around the bead. And what I'm going to do is stick down one side first of all. Can you hear that rain? Absolutely hammering on the roof of my shed here. And then just around there. Now don't worry about how this looks underneath, because you're only going to see the top, and it's just to cover the bead really. There we go. If you've used, say, a coloured plastic bead, you might want to put a couple of sheets of crepe, because it is quite, especially as it's a light colour, you can kind of see through it. So if you've used a brightly coloured plastic bead or something, you can always put more than one layer of crepe to cover it. So that's going to form the base of my flower. So next up, I'm going to die cut the two. These are going to go round the bead like so. So I'm going to cut those from the lighter yellow, and then I'm going to cut one each of the petals from a slightly darker yellow. So my die cutting machine's just off camera, so I'll come back when I've done my die cutting. So I've got one each of my petals, and then I've got these two centre pieces. Now I find it easier to use a pokey tool to just pop a little hole in the centre of anything that's going around the stem. So I've got my mat here, and I'm just going to pop holes in the centre of both of these, and then I will also need to do the same with these petals here, like so. So I'm going to start with the smallest, and I'm just going to thread that onto the wire like so. And I'll pop just a tiny dot of glue just to stop it spinning round once it's on there, like so. And then I'll do the same with the larger one. I'll just put a little dot of glue there, and when I slide that up, I'm going to move around. With the two large petals, it doesn't matter which way round you put them. On there, and then once you've got that on, if you want to take your shaping tool, you can. You could do this before you pop it on and give it a little curl upwards or downwards, whichever, and then a little stretch here and there just to give it that kind of floppy look that you're after. And then we'll do the same with the next one. I'll do this one before I pop it on actually. You can do it either way. So I like to do one upwards, one downwards, just to, and then just a little stretch. And then we'll thread that on. And again, I'm just going to pop a bit of glue to stop it spinning around, and then I'll put that at an angle, like so. And then you've got this one individual petal. So again, you can give that a quick shape with your tool and a bit of a stretch. And then if you just put a little bit of glue at the bottom, then you can attach it wherever you think it's going to fit best on the flower. There we go. Move those bits of glue string. And that's our finished California poppy. Here's the one I did earlier. Again, it's personal preference if you want to add some florist tape to the stem to cover up the wire. Depends really how you're going to display it. but that's the California poppy. The next flower we're going to look at is the wild peony, and now we're into the flowers where you are going to cut multiples of the different petals. So I'll tell you how many of each I've cut and I'll show you, but this is personal preference. So if you want a peony that looks more full, let me grab one. Here's a couple of peonies I've made. Now for mine, I have cut, and this is what we're going to do now, but feel free to alter these numbers. For the fringe that goes around the bead, I've cut 4. You can do 3 or 4 really, I think works best for those. Then this petal here is one that threads onto the wire, so I do 4 of those. Then the next size, I do 6 of these, so I cut this 3 times to give me 6 petals. And then for the large one, I do the same, so I have 6 of these. So again, die cut it 3 times, and then you've got a leaf to go on the stem if you want to. So I'll quickly do all the die cutting. I'm going to be doing the petals all from this nice pink, and then I will do the inside and cover the bead with a light yellow. So I'm going to start with the light yellow. First of all, I'm going to cover the bead. So I'm just going to roughly cut an oval of the light yellow. We'll use quite a large bead for this. As before, I've got my florist wire. I'm going to bend over the top, and then I'm going to pop some hot glue into the inside of the bead, and then pop my wire in. I'll leave that for a couple of seconds, and then I will take the piece of crepe paper that I've just cut a scrap of and just curl that round so that it's going to fit nicely over the bead. I'll pop some glue on one side so then I can pop that over, and then just tidy up the bottom. Tuck that in. You won't see the bottom half of this, so you know you really haven't got to be too careful here. You just want the top to look nice because that's going to be on show for this particular flower. Like so. And if you've got any excess, you can always just trim it off so it looks nice and tidy. And then for the die cutting, you want 4 of these. Make sure you cut them crossways like so with the grain of the crepe paper. Same for the petals. When you come to do your petals, make sure that the grain of the crepe paper is vertical on each petal so that you're able to stretch it across. So for the first part, I'm going to take these 4 little fringed pieces, and I'm just going to run glue along the bottom, and then these are going to go around the bead sort of about 3/4 of the way down and just wrap around, and then you can fluff them out. So we'll just do the same. Follow that round just to give a nice fringe. And I think 4 gives you a nice full fringe around. Make sure you start at different areas if it doesn't quite go all the way around, as it doesn't with this bead. There we go, you stretch it. One more. So yeah, I think 3 or 4 is the optimum for these. Okay. There we go. And then once they're on, give it a nice fluff out. So that's going to be the centre of the flower. Next are the 4 sort of double petals. And again, I'm going to stick a hole in these. I'm going to use the match from my paper sculpting kit, just to put a hole in the centre of each of those so that I can easily thread them onto the wire. And then it's up to you if you want to shape them before you put them on the wire or after. Doesn't matter which way. But what you do need to do for this particular flower is curl them. So I've got my lovely fold and curl tool, and all you need to do with this is slide your petal in and then just curl it. You can do it towards you or away from you. You'll get the same result, obviously. Whatever's most comfortable for you. Now, if you haven't got this tool, I will put a link to it in the description box here on YouTube, so you can get one if you want to. They are pretty inexpensive. If you haven't got a tool, then you'll have to just sort of use whatever you've got to just give the petals a bit of a curl. But you can see you get a much better effect with this tool than by doing it any other way, really. So it's well worth getting one of these. Once you've given them all a curl, put your fingers about halfway up the petal and then just stretch the crepe with your fingers, and you'll get a lovely cupped petal effect. And then you can pop that on the wire, feed it on. You've got to line up the hole first. There we go. And just pop a bit of glue to hold that in place, just to stop it spinning around. And then we'll do the same with the next one. So halfway down the flower, and just curl that out. And then we'll slide it on. Dot of glue, just so that it doesn't spin. And if we put these sort of at a cross shape, and then I'll do the next layer sort of diagonally. Same thing, curl those round like so. Pop a dot of glue there. And then we'll have that going that way. And then the last one, same thing, just give that a nice curl. Slide that on. Like so. So that's the first layer of petals, and already you can see that's really taking shape. You can fluff out your petals, and you will get bits of glue string everywhere. It's inevitable. So the next layer is the medium-sized petals, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with these as we did with the bottom layer, and that's to curl them with the tool and then give them a stretch in the centre to give them that lovely cup shape. There we go. You can see that having this tool really does speed this bit up. So we've got 6 of these. If you want a bigger, more sort of full flower, obviously you can do more than 6. Now when I get to this point, I find it easier to work with the flower upside down, and all you're going to do is pop a bit of glue on the bottom piece of the flower and then just line it up. I also find it easier to turn my flower as I work. It's really easy to lose track of where you're at with your petals if you're just putting them on, because they sort of blend into each other. So if you get into the habit of rotating your flower each time, you know you're just putting your flower at the bottom each time, kind of 6 o'clock. I find this a much easier way. Now I'm not really overlapping these so much. They are overlapping a little bit, but not overly. And I think for this flower that works quite well. but obviously it depends which flower you're working with as to whether you're going to overlap them or not. I'm literally turning a quarter each time for this one. There we go. So that's my medium petals, and you can see it's instantly taking shape, and it's got a lovely realistic look. So final petals, the larger ones, we've got 6 of these again, exactly the same thing. Give them a curl, then a shape, all of them. Like so. Last one. There we go. And then the same thing, dot of glue at the bottom, pop it on, turn, and work your way around. There we go. Obviously you can choose whatever colours you want to do for these. Peonies I think do come in quite a wide range of colours. There we go. And just one more to go. There we go. And there's our beautiful peony. Now in this set you've got a leaf if you want to add that on, and again if you want to add floral tape to the stem you can do. I won't do that in this because I did do it on the last one, so if you want to see me do that just watch the last flower, but to save time I won't. So that's the wild peony. It's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? I really like this one. So the next flower we're going to look at is the carnation, and for this one the base is going to start off a bit different actually. Now let me show you the dies. So you've got these sort of string of petals almost. Now I've cut 4 of those, and those are going to go on the inside. So I've got 4 of those. Then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 of this petal. Those are going to go around that one. The reason you've got them in a string is because with a carnation, let me grab a finished one and show you. With a carnation, the centre's quite enclosed. You won't see the beads on this one. And then depending on how full you want it to be, I've got 10 of the outside petals here. Of course you can fluff them out if you want to, if you want it to look more open. But the centre is very sort of quite tight, so that's what those are for. Then you've got this piece here which you cut from green, and that's going to cover along around the bottom to sort of tidy it up. And then you've got a leaf. You can cut a couple of leaves to go on the stem if you want to, and again you've got the choice whether you want to cover the stem with wire or with tape or not. Now the first thing to note with the carnation, because the shape of this is quite long, we're going to use 2 beads, a smaller one and a larger one on top. So I'm going to grab a piece of wire. As before, I'm just going to curl the top round, but I'm going to use 2 beads, 2 different sizes. So we'll have a small and a larger, and the larger bead's going to go on top. So I'm going to pop some glue inside both beads, and then I'm going to thread my wire through the smaller bead first. Let's get these straight. Right, smaller one first, then onto the larger, like so. Now if you feel that's not very secure, I can feel mine's quite secure, you can always put a bit of glue in between them just to make sure they stay put. But once you've wrapped all of your crepe paper around them, that will also help secure them. So that's going to be the basis. Now I don't need to cover those because the inside of this is so sort of tight you won't see the beads at all. So I don't need to worry about covering them. So the first thing we're going to do are these long strips. Let me move my die set out of the way. And what we're going to do is just at the bottom of each petal, just give it a stretch, because this is going to curl around your bead. Now for the first couple of layers, don't do anything with the top. Don't give that a stretch, because this is going to be the sort of tightly curled inside piece of the flower. And we're just going to go around the top bead, not the bottom one. That's going to be covered with the green at the end, and that's kind of going to give the shape of the flower. So we're just going to wrap these around the bottom, the top bead, like so, and leave that quite tight at the top because that's the sort of centre of the flower. You can always pop a bit just to keep that tight. So that's the first layer, and we're going to do the same for the second layer. So a little cup at the bottom, like so, and then a bit of glue all along the bottom. Like so. And then we'll wrap that around the bead. Like so. There we go. So that's the sort of nice tight centre of the flower. So for the next two layers, the bottom will be the same. Cup that so that it will fit around the bead. But then we'll also give the top a little bit of a stretch. Put some glue all along the bottom. And we'll work our way around the bead, covering that up. And then we'll just fluff that out just slightly. And then the last layer, exactly the same. But for the top, I'm going to stretch it out even more. So we'll go around our bead. And I'm going to make sure the top's quite fluffed out for this one. There we go. And now we start to add the real shape to this. Make sure you sort of tuck the bottom in quite nicely, because when you cover this with the green, you kind of want it following the shape of the bead a little bit. There we go. So now for these outer petals, I've cut 10 of these. And I'm going to curl them outwards and then give them a little stretch. So we'll do that with all of them. And I'm just stretching them at the top. Last one. And then same thing with these, just glue along the bottom and then make sure they're kind of tightly round that bottom bead like so, and that's what's going to give you the sort of flower shape coming out. You can overlap these. I just overlap them slightly as I go. And obviously make sure you've got them so the curls going outwards. And the more you overlap them, the sort of tighter bud you'll get. So depending on how open you want the flower to be. And again, I've done 10. You can keep going if you want to. Bear in mind though, if you keep going, you will end up with the bottom a bit too bulky to cover nicely with the green. So I wouldn't really go more than about 15 petals if you do want to add more. You can see it's really starting to take shape now. I'm just overlapping them slightly. There we go. And then one more. So, and then the final part is to cover up. Obviously the bottom does look quite messy where you've got all the petals overlapping, and that bead at the bottom is going to give the bottom a nice curve. So you can fluff out your petals to get the look you want. And of course, if you do want a fuller flower, you can add more petals if you want to. There we go. And then for the bottom, I find it works if you just curve the bottom a little bit like we did with the red, just so it can fit nicely around that bead. And depending on what size bead you've used, you might feel that you want to trim this. So if you cup it around the bead at the bottom, like so, then you can just kind of follow it around, over, you know, pinch it in so that you get it as neat as possible. You can overlap it, like so. And then once you've got this all covered, of course you can trim it, because it depends what size bead you've got. There we go. So I can probably trim this from there onwards. And if you just curve it around a little, you won't see. Like so. And then I would recommend using a finger protector to just sort of squish the bottom in. And you can give it a twist, like so. And for this one, I would say use some tape, because you've got the bottom where you've kind of twisted it around, and it does look much neater if you put tape on this one. I've got glue strings everywhere here. So if you start your tape right at the top there, it'll just neaten up that base. And then you can work your way down, all the way down. I'm very slow at putting this tape on. When I look at other YouTube videos, people are so fast at this. So I won't do all of it. So you can follow that all the way down to the bottom and it'll just neaten it up. And then you can fluff out your petals. You've got a leaf in this one, so if you want to add that to your stem, you can do. I did on this one here. And as you can see, oh, the other thing to mention with the carnation as well, if you want to, before you put your petals on, I know with some carnations they quite often have a different colour just literally around the top of each petal. You can add colour with a marker pen or oil pastels, whatever you want to. So if you want to do that, that does give a really nice look to the end of your petals if you want to create that type of carnation. So that's the carnation. So the next one we're going to look at is the classic rose, and I think we'll go for a nice dark dramatic rose. For the rose, you've got 3 different size petals, you've got your leaves, and then you've got this piece to go on the bottom just to tidy that up. Now for the rose, I personally do 6 of the smallest, 4 or 6 depending on how you want it to look. I think 6 is better actually. Then 8 of the medium and 10 of the large. So we're going to start with those. I'll do the die cutting. Again, don't forget to do your petals so that the grain of the crepe paper is running vertically down them. So I'll just quickly die cut those and then we can start to put this together. So I've die cut all the petals, and for the rose we want not a huge bead for the centre, and I'll just grab my wire. So as with all the other flowers, I'm just going to bend this wire over, pop some glue in here, and then just feed that in, and I'll just let that set for a second. Now with the rose, it's personal preference really as to what how you want the centre to be. Let me just grab a couple to show you. Obviously roses can be quite closed in the centre, or you can have them quite open. So it depends how you do the centre really as to how sort of open your rose will be. Well, let's do a relatively closed one. Now the first thing is the bead will be on show, so it's a good idea to just cover it with the same colour crepe paper. So I'm just going to cover the bead with some of this. Again, I'm just going to cut a really rough oval shape. And give it a stretch. And then I'll just put some glue. Oops. So I've probably cut far too big a oval here. And if you just tuck that in at the bottom. So that's covered that all up nicely. So that's going to give me my starting point. Then for the smallest petals, you're going to give them a little bit of a stretch, and then it kind of depends how closed you want the rose to be as to whether you give them a curl outwards. I think they look a bit better if you don't actually, because generally the centre of a rose is quite tightly sort of compacted really. So just give them a little stretch. Also, because the centre is quite tight, overlap them quite a bit and make sure you're kind of sticking them at the sides a little bit so they're quite tight to the bead, and that's going to give you a nice sort of closed centre. There we go. Like so. Obviously, if you really want it quite tight, use a really small bead. But I quite like that. There we go. So that's a nice starting point, and it's really when you add the later layers that it really starts to take shape. So for the sort of medium petals, we've got 8 of these, and if you look at the die, actually they're not the same. One is slightly larger than the other, and that's going to give you some nice sort of variation as you build this. It doesn't matter which one you use. You don't have to kind of separate them into the 2 different sizes, because the randomness is what will kind of give it a natural looking shape. So for these, with a rose, they would be the petals curl outwards. So I'm going to give them a little curl and then just stretch them a bit at the top. Like so. So wet way through them. Again, I've used 8. You don't have to use 8. You can use more than that if you want to. Okay. There we go. So once you've got those all shaped, we're going to start to assemble them just with a bit of glue at the bottom. And it kind of helps if you work from the underneath, really, and just pop those on. And because a rose is fairly closed in, you do want to be overlapping these. With the peony, we were kind of doing them barely overlapping. With these, I think you do want to overlap them by about 1/3, I guess. And because a rose is quite pointed at the bottom, you do want to make sure that you're kind of following the shape of the bead nicely at the bottom. Like so. And you can see that's going to give a lovely closed shape. I love this dark burgundy colour. It's a really sort of dramatic. There we go. There we go. And just one more of this size. Now with overlapping them as I've done, I think 8 is just quite nicely covers that. Obviously you can do more if you want to. There we go. So that's the medium layers, and then we're going to do exactly the same for the larger petals. With the larger petals, I've got 10, and again I'm going to just curl them out and give them a stretch. So last 2. There we go. And at this point you might want to start working with the flower upside down if it's easier. And you do want to put your glue kind of in a bit of a V shape on the bottom, because you want to make sure that you're kind of following that cone shape at the bottom. Also, where you're overlapping your petals, it will kind of hold them in shape. So just a V. You can see it's really starting to take shape now. Something quite relaxing about doing this. I think it's the repetition. Obviously, if you wanted to create like more of a rose bud, you would just curl the leaves inwards instead of outwards, and you'd get them all sort of quite tightly curled in. Move all these bits of glue out the way. They spoil the look of it a bit. But I love it in this colour. It's really quite dramatic. Okay. Last one. I need to reload my glue gun. I'll get this last one done first. There we go. So that's the rose done. And again, you can continue to shape the petals if you want it. So you can play around with the petals and have it as closed or open as you like. And with this set, you've got this piece here, which I'm going to die cut from some green card, and that's just going to tidy up the bottom nicely. So I'll grab some green, not card, crepe. I keep saying card. Some green crepe. So I'll just quickly die cut that. And as before, I'm just going to pop a hole in that so that I can thread it onto my wire nicely. And then I'll just pop a little dot of glue to hold that in place, like so. With the rose set, you've got two really nice little petals that you can put on as you want to. Let me grab back the ones that I made earlier. So you can see you can pop those on, cover it with tape if you want to, and then depending on how you do the centre, you've got quite a different look to your roses. This pink one's quite open, so you can play around with the look. So that's the classic rose. And then the last flower we've got is the ranunculus. This is my favourite. Out of all of them, this is probably the most difficult, I would say. It's not difficult at all, but it's harder than the rest, basically. But it isn't difficult. Now, for the ranunculus, let me bring in a couple of done ones. I love this one. Now, on the packaging, there's quite a closed, sort of quite tight ranunculus, and that is my favourite, I think. But you do get different varieties, and some of them are quite open. Let me find, I had one. Yeah, here's one I did that's more open. So depending on how you curve and cup your petals, you can get different looks. But I would say the more tight one is the kind of, you know, what most people think of when they think of ranunculus. So I love these. So for the petals, the numbers I've used are, let me just grab my list to remind myself. I do 6 of these, so die cut that 3 times. Then for the medium I do 10, and then for the large petal I do 15. And that gives me that size ranunculus. Obviously they look beautiful if you really go to town and make them even bigger. So you really wouldn't, it wouldn't be too much, you know, if you think about it, to do another. You could even do sort of 20 of the outside petals, because you can just keep going with this one and it's going to give you a lovely big flower head. So use these as a starting point. So 6, 10 and 15. But really, I think with this flower, the more you add, the more beautiful and big it's going to be. So as with the others, you've got this piece for going on the bottom, and then you've got a nice leaf as well that you can add if you want to. So I'll just quickly die cut all of these pieces and we can put this together. So I've got all my die cutting done. I've got 6 of the small, 10 of the medium, 15 of the large petals, and then I've got 1 each of the base and the leaf. So that's all the die cutting done. So I can pop those out the way. Now I need a bead for the centre, and I'm going to cover my bead with a nice yellow. The crepe I've used for the flower is this nice peach colour actually, because I haven't made a flower out of this one yet, so I thought we'd go with that. For the centre, I'm just going to take a scrap of this pale yellow and we'll cut it into a rough oval, really rough oval. There we go. And we'll go for a fairly large bead for this one. Actually, we'll go for the biggest because that really does give you the base shape. And I need a piece of wire. So I'll just bend that round, pop some hot glue into my bead. Too much hot glue. And then pop the wire in. Definitely use a finger protector for this bit, like so. And then I can cover that. It takes literally seconds for that glue to cool down enough and hold that wire in place. So as before, I'll just cup this crepe paper round to cover the bead. So I'll pop that over, tuck the bottom in. And then just push it down. You will only see the very top of this, so don't worry if the bottom looks a bit messy. If you use too big a bit, you can just trim some off, but that's gonna be perfect. So that's gonna give me my lovely rounded shape to this. So for the first layer, we've got 6 of these smallest petals, and this really is where this tool comes in to its own, because this particular flower is very shaped. So for each oval, I'm going to really curl it, and then I'm going to put my fingers halfway down the petal and cup it, and really stretch it, because you really want that full cup. And this is where also the quality of this crepe paper is fantastic, because these will retain this shape once I've cupped them. So I'm going to work my way through. As I say, I've got 6 of this size. I want that really nice cup shape. Like so. There we go. There we go. So what we're going to do with these is we're going to put some glue, just a tiny dot at each side, and then a little bit at the bottom. and we're going to place it around the bead. And for these small ones, we're going to quite closely follow the shape of the bead, because this is going to give the shape for the whole flower really. So overlap, so you've got quite a nice tight fit to the bead for this layer. And that's why I'm sort of gluing up the sides as well, because you really want to be holding this sort of quite tightly onto the bead, like so. So really quite close. And we've got a couple more. There we go. So that's the first layer, and as you can see, you can only see the top of that bead, and it looks really nice. So we're going to do exactly the same. We've got 10 of the next size, so we're going to do the same thing. Curl, cup, curl. I'll show you a couple, then I'll jump ahead, because you don't want to watch me doing 10, and you certainly don't want to watch me doing 15 when we get to the next layer. So after this one, I'll jump ahead. So I'm on the last one now, and so that's 10 of those of that size. Now from this point onwards, it's easier to work with the flower upside down really, if it'll stay, because it does get a bit easy to lose track of where you're at with your petals otherwise. So I'm going to pop the first one down and make sure that's sort of following the curl nicely. And then just work my way around. I'll probably need to get this first layer down actually before I can sort of stand the flower up. Okay. And I'm just going to continue working my way around, and you'll notice I'm smoothing it sort of at the bottom to make sure I'm following that shape, and that's what gives you that closed kind of look. Okay, now I've got a few down there, so hopefully stand here. And then I can do what I was doing before, and that's keep turning this and keeping my petals kind of at 6 o'clock, and I know where I'm at. There we go. So that's 10 of the medium-sized petals, and you can see it's really starting to take shape, and because I'm smoothing it down as I go, the bottom's got that lovely rounded shape to it. So we're going to do exactly the same. So I've got 15 of these large petals. You could do more than that. I would say this is kind of the minimum amount. So I'm going to curl halfway down the petal and stretch it out to give me that lovely cup shape. So curl, curve. So again, I'll jump ahead to save you watching me do this 15 times. So I'm on the last one. So I've got 15 of those, and we'll do the same thing. This is so kind of therapeutic doing this. It's really relaxing. This is definitely my favourite of all of these flowers. I do love ranunculus. Okay. There we go. And I'll skip forward again because I am just going to keep doing this till I've got all of them on. So I've skipped forward just a little bit. I've got the last 4 to do now. And you can see it's really taking shape. And as I say, this is kind of the minimum I would do, 15. You can keep going if you want to, because it just follows the same shape and it'll just make it larger. And because these are kind of so tightly put onto each other, you know, it works really. You can do as many as you like. So that's my beautiful ranunculus. And then all I need to do is add this piece on the bottom. So as before, I'll just, there's bits of glue string everywhere. I'll just pop a hole in that so that I can thread it onto my wire more easily. Let's do it this way. There we go. And I'll just pop a bit of glue at the base there. So that sits on nicely. Now you've got with this one, this really pretty leaf that you can add onto the stem if you want to. If you add it on, I just pop a bit of glue. Make sure you use your finger protector for this bit because you really have got quite a bit of glue there. And then if you want to, you can add on some of your wire just to tidy that up once that glue's dry. And that just gives a nice look to that. So I'll bring in the other ones I did before just to remind you of the different looks you can get. So I've gone for a slightly darker peach colour with the crepe for this one. These ones were with the lighter sort of blush pink, but they work really well together, I think. This would make a lovely bouquet. And then this is the one where I didn't curl the petals. I've just sort of assembled them in the same way, but I didn't do that cupping. So you get more of a open look there. But they're absolutely stunning, I think. So that's the ranunculus. So that's all of the flowers now. So just to remind you, here's all of them all done. So we did the tulip first. That's the fringed tulip. Then we did the California poppy, which is that one. I think we did we do the rose next or the carnation? I can't remember. We did the carnation, I think. Carnation, then the rose. Oh, we did the peony before that. So there's the peony, and then we did the ranunculus. So that's the full set of 6. I hope you've found this tutorial useful. Pop over to my blog as well, because I've got typed up instructions there as well of all, with lists of all the petals. I'll put details in the description box on YouTube here of all the products as well. So hopefully you found that useful, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.